Jazz is one of the most misused words in the English language. It's been called straight ahead, hard, cool, smooth. It's been fused, and it's been free. But to many so-called jazz musicians, the word itself is tantamount to a slur.
I don't like that word jazz.
I'm Dara Starr Tucker, and this is The Breakdown. The word jazz is thought to have derived from the slang term jazzin', which can be traced to this word, which means what you probably think it means. It's a vulgar word that was used in the brothels of New Orleans to refer to copulation. Many words that describe black music spring from African-American vernacular English, the original meanings of which are somewhat less than savory. Boogie woogie, gig, jelly roll, juke, swing, funk. If you decide to look them up, be prepared to do some pearl clutching. Now, the earliest date the word jazz appears in print is in 1915 in the Chicago Sunday Tribune, where a white writer named Gordon Seagrove is attempting to describe to a white audience the effect that the blues had on people. The article, called Blues is Jazz and Jazz is Blues, correctly states that the music he was describing had its roots in Black American folk culture, but the extracting of the Black influence and the crass commercialization for financial gain, coupled with the ascribing of this vulgar term to it, left a bad taste in the mouths of many of its progenitors, which still exist today. The first known recording that called itself jazz was actually made by a white band, the original Dixieland Jazz Band, JASS, which later became JAZZ. That happened in 1917. The band was started by a promoter in Chicago who set out to assemble a white group who could imitate the sounds that black musicians were creating in New Orleans. They initially thought it might be seen as a novelty recording, but white audiences took to it, and it launched the Dixieland craze of the 1920s. The pattern of white musicians latching onto music created by black musicians and sanitizing it for white audiences would repeat itself multiple times throughout the 20th century and beyond. It's become so predictable you can set your watch to it. The blues and ragtime are co-opted to become jazz. R&B, boogie woogie, and jump blues were sanitized for white audiences and became rock and roll. Early jazz funk was stomped flat as a pancake and became smooth jazz. And even hip-hop, born out of the gritty street music of New York's outer boroughs, eventually underwent a whitewashing that produced this.
Never stop, yo, I don't know. Turn off the lights and now blow.
Over the years, musicians like Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, and Miles Davis have suggested various terms to label the music that more accurately represents what was begun by those early black folk artists in New Orleans.
Jazz is a four-letter word, which means exploitation. It means that we are being used. See, jazz opens the door for anybody. Everybody else kind of comes behind and they just take a little bit of what all these people are doing and make something out of it and make money out of it.
You call it black classical music. Do you consider gospel and rhythm and blues?
Yes, all of it is beautiful black music to me.
Contemporary musicians such as trumpeter Nicholas Payton have advocated for a similar umbrella term, Black American music.
So we didn't use that word. Louis Armstrong himself said we didn't call it that. They're making a mockery of the music the way I see it. It's minstrelsy. Duke Ellington said that 80 years ago. Call it Negro music, which is why I call it Black American music.
Though many take issue with labeling it this way, they would never dispute that mariachi music, for instance, is Mexican in origin, regardless of who played it or what other cultures influenced it. Korean fusion cooking is still Korean, and that probably boils down to the fact that those cultures are seen as distinct and worthy of recognition, where Black American culture is seen as merely a shadow of mainstream American culture, if it's recognized as a culture at all. But I think what we're really talking about here is a question of agency. Black musicians were robbed of a sense of agency when their music was commodified and appropriated. It would stand to reason that as they reclaimed this sense of agency, they would also want to reclaim the narrative about where the music came from and what it should be called.